Yeah, I saw it. Doing his feet. It's not a full house, so we might as well move down and consolidate a little bit.
All right, everybody, we're going to get started here in just a second. If everybody can start moving towards the seat. All righty. Welcome, everybody, to the EMS Committee. We'd have gotten started sooner, but the chair of the Disaster Committee likes to hear himself talk, so we went right up to the time. Not that that's a problem for me. So anyway, before we get started in our agenda, we do have two new members with us. We have Chris Alexander sitting next to me from San Marcos, Hayes County EMS, and Walter Kuykendall from Elite Medical Transport. I'd like to welcome you guys to the committee. If there's anything you'd like to share with the group, feel free to take a mic and say anything. I got to get them talking early.
That's right. Good morning, everyone. As Dudley said, I'm Chris Alexander. I'm with San Marcos, Hayes County EMS, the chief there. My first foray into the state of Texas, state level activities, but I've been in EMS about 32 years, spent the majority of my career in Kansas working fire-based EMS, spent some time working on state activities there, and bring a wide variety of interests to the state. And it's nice to be able to see that we can be involved at the state level as local agencies, which is a little unusual.
Good morning, I'm Walter Kuykendall from Elite Medical Transport in El Paso, Texas. I've been involved in EMS for 27 years now. We work in both Texas and New Mexico, so I hope I can bring that experience from both states to help in Texas.
Thank y'all, guys. Hang on one second. So, I don't know how many of you were at the disaster committee meeting, but they did this, and I was going to do it anyway, and I still think it's appropriate for us to do it. Yesterday was Monday night going into yesterday was a dark day for a couple of EMS agencies in the state of Texas, both losing personnel on the line of duty. The Dallas Fire Rescue Department as well as Sterling City EMS both lost personnel in the line of duty. And so what I'd like to do is just take a moment of silence and keep them, their families, and their agencies in our thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
Dudley?
Yes, ma'am.
Real quick, because I've had some people ask, I'm with Dallas Fire Rescue. For those who have asked, the service for Scott Tanksley is going to be Monday at 10 o'clock. So if you want any further details, you can see me after this. But I've had several people ask if we've already set a date and time. So it'll be Monday at 10.
All righty. And the rack out for Sterling City is doing a lot of work there, so you can talk to them if there's anything you'd like to help with them, and they'll be sharing information on those services as well, I'm sure, as soon as they become available. We're going to rearrange our agenda a little bit just to help some folks who have come as guests to our committee to present some things that will be beneficial to us as EMS operators. The first thing, we're going to move number 10 up to number 1, and this is a presentation by the Texas Medical Association, their program called Hard Hats for Little Heads. Tammy Wishart is here from the Texas Medical Association to do a presentation and talk to us a little bit about bicycle helmets and how they could help us get them more prevalent in our communities. Tammy?
Thank you. I wanted to let you know about a program that TMA has, Hard Hats for Little Heads Bike Helmet Giveaway Program, that might be of interest in your local communities. This is our helmet. It's a matching program, so if you purchase helmets, you get some additional free helmets from TMA to give. And in the past, we've had some local EMSs get involved, and we just thought it would be good to come back and let you know about this program again. We're really pushing hard this year. It happens to be our 20th birthday, and so we're trying to give away a lot of helmets this year through the program. And I have some flyers, and they'll be out on the table if others would like to pick them up. But there's some easy steps at the top on what you need to do. It's very easy. Contact me. We order the helmets. They come to you, and you give them away at an event in your community. It can happen very quickly and easily. And then at the bottom, you'll see our map. And if your county is in white, we have not had an event there yet. So we'd love to have them anywhere, but if you're especially in those counties where there hasn't been an event, we'd love to have you contact me. The helmets are $7.35 a piece. And so if you buy 50, you get 50 free from TMA. So for around $375, you can give away 100 helmets in your community. And the match goes up from there, but that's the best because that's a one-on-one match. So if there are any questions, otherwise I will leave the information. I should mention that we do have educational materials as well, and those are all free. And if you decide to do an event, I will send you all that information.
All righty, thank you, ma'am. Any questions for Tammy? She's not going to stick around to the end. Anybody in the public have any questions for her you'd like to ask? The flyers are on the table out front where the agendas are and where the sign-in is, so please be sure to take one of those. This is a great program. As a hobbyist cyclist, I can tell you my helmet has been extremely beneficial. And I'm an adult, and as kids who have the big heads that like to hit the ground first, I think it's probably even more important that we get those throughout our community. So anyhow, I appreciate you coming, and she'll be on her way out if y'all want to grab her, but the flyers are out in the hallway if you'd like to take advantage of that. All righty. Next we have three things that have been on our agenda for several meetings now. The first one is the proposed revisions to Title 25 of the Texas Administrative Code, Section 157.11, regarding changes mandated by the House bill and the Senate bill in the last legislative session. And Joe, I'll let you update us on where that is, if you wouldn't mind. I know it got introduced, but I don't know where it's headed after that.
Sure. It will be published in the Texas Registry on the 15th. So that goes into the 30-day comment period. So we're still on target to have this completed before the deadline of August 31st.
All right.
February
15th, this
February.
weekend.
Any questions for Joe on those rule changes? Have there been any more proposed? Have you guys edited or proposed anything other since we met in November?
No,
Okay.
same document.
Next is recommendations to DSHS. So we spent the fall traveling around the state of Texas. The EMS committee came up with a paper based upon input from hundreds of EMS stakeholders around the state. We delivered that to GTAC, who approved it, and delivered it to DSHS as recommendations from EMS stakeholders on further ways to reduce fraud in the non-emergency transportation market. And Joe, if you could give us an update on that, and then I have a couple questions about that report. So
Sure. This report really was affected by the snow and the ice in Texas, the cold weather. For the last 3 meetings that we were to meet on it, it was iced. It was iced over, so we converted to conference calls. But it's in its final approval, going through the different agencies, having the directors approve it. The document is written. It has to be approved by Texas Medical Board, HHSC, and DSHS. I would expect that to go out up to the legislators next week. And an addendum to it was the report produced by this committee.
okay. So for everybody in the room and everybody on this committee that worked hard and brought your comments forward and got people to show up at meetings, on that last little line there, the 3 groups had to file in a joint report. Tied to that report is going to be the document that we produced after all the work we did last fall. So everybody should be commended for that. I think that helps steer some of the recommendations. It'll be interesting to see that paper once it's final and becomes public. But instead of just trying to take pieces out of it that folks at those 3 agencies felt were important, they're attaching the entire document to their report as well, so it can stand on its own. So I appreciate the efforts of Joe and Jane and pushing the level of support that the stakeholders gave on that and keeping that attached in its entirety. Anybody else have any questions for Joe on that? All righty. EMS for Children's update. Here he comes.
Good morning. So I just wanted to give you all the brief. I just got shot. Just wanted to give you all a brief update on the final response rates from the statewide EMS assessment. Our cohort closed on January the 8th. We had a 71% response rate. That's the official number. We also had a handful of agencies that chose that they wanted that were not chosen as part of the sampling, and that wanted to participate. So our unofficial number is actually 72%. We'll be adding those in as soon as we get our data back from the folks at the national level. Excuse me. The last cohort closes at the end of this month, so we anticipate getting our state and national data back hopefully in March. They should also be sending us our data from the 2010 survey so we can compare the two. We will be putting together a presentation for that we'd like to present to you in May, if you're all okay with that. If we have about 15-20 minutes in May to present all that information to you. And that's all I have for you.
All right.
Y'all have any questions? And these are the current numbers right now. Starla pulled this up on the computer for me. These are all current as of this morning, I believe. So, from all the states.
You might want to repeat it. I can't read it, so I'm sure they can't read it. What those numbers say, I can see the numbers, but I can't see what it says in front of it.
You mean in the little box?
Yeah, in the box.
Oh, okay. So the total number of agencies we had respond was 326 out of the 459 that were surveyed for that 71%, and that's what that says. So.
On that, so you had agencies contact you that were not randomly, and I don't know how random the selection was. I know there were agencies, I know you focused that selection on agencies to fill this out aimed in a certain direction. But my question for you is the ones who wanted to do it in addition, so y'all feel that's not large enough to skew the data one way or the other? So is it an agency that says, well, man, we can't get our city to buy us anything, so we're really short and we really want to answer this so we can show them how bad we look? Or the other side is, we got a children's ambulance. We want to answer this so that it looks good. You know, is that going to potentially skew? I guess the number's small enough you're not concerned about that skewing that data any at all?
Yeah, the number is small enough to where
Okay.
it's not going to skew any of the data. Like I said, it only took us from 71 to 72%, so I think that might have been 5 agencies.
Okay.
To be quite honest with you, I don't know what their reasoning was behind why they wanted to fill it out.
Maybe they hadn't filled out enough surveys.
That could be. You never know.
There is a shortage of surveys out there going around.
But yeah, I honestly don't know what their reasonings were from wanting to participate. But yeah, it's not going to be a large enough number to skew the data one way or the other. And as far as the official data is concerned, we'll just be using those 326. Those other ones we'll add in just for our to see how that affects the state as a whole, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. That's all I have, so thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate you being here. Joe, I want to step back up. There was 2 things I had on my notes that I just didn't see that I wanted to mention on the report piece.
Sure.
And the House bill and Senate bill that have gone into effect. The first thing was we discussed this prior to the last meeting, and the report didn't get put up on the DSHS GTAC website. Is that a possibility to get that report up there so everybody can see it? I get contacted for people wanting to see copies of it, and I try to disseminate it as widely as I could, but it'd be a lot easier when they call if I could just say, go to the DSHS website and look here.
I'm sure it's not a problem.
Okay. I think it was going to happen, and then with everything with the conference and and you getting off probation and stuff like that. So we're stuck with him now. By the way,
they took the bracelet off.
So, and then the other piece of that I wanted to mention, just for the public good, is we had some folks coming in to visit us the other day to ask some questions about some things we were doing there from another municipality. And one of the things we were going to talk about led me to I was curious about how up to date the listing of providers was on the DSHS website. In the public records, you can go get a list of all the licensed EMS transport providers. And Brett Hart told me that it had been updated just within the last few days, and this was, I guess, last week. And so I went on there, I pulled the list down and was looking at this county where this municipality is, and was looking at a couple of things, and I scrolled to the bottom of the list. And for the first time in ages, now this has good and bad to it, but for the first time in ages, there is less than 1,000 EMS transport providers in the state of Texas today. That number at its peak was about 1,500. I did not go to look at Harris County and Fort Bend County and Montgomery County, all the areas around Houston or down in the valley, to really look to see if those numbers had gone down, because I don't know what those numbers were at their peak. But I have a sneaking suspicion, and Joe, you may be able to add to this, that efforts prior to the legislative session have probably were somewhat successful, and then the fact that nobody's been able to get a new provider license for the last 6 months is probably also beneficial.
And you're exactly right. There was, over the last 2 years, about 260, 270 licenses just went away. And I think it is a joint effort between DSHS as well as our federal partners, as we looked at and validate and research these companies and make sure they really exist. And obviously, with having no new services coming in for this full year because of this moratorium, is helping for sure. And we're not seeing, and we're not hearing, and I'm sure we would, of any negative impact from the moratorium, where some areas aren't being covered or something to that nature.
Alrighty. Next on our agenda is the updated status of revisions to Chapter 157.
Okay. They're all for me today. And as I reported the last one, it's ongoing internally, and we're going to use the process. I have all the notes from all the past committee meetings and stuff like that, and I've started already drafting 157.11 with some really major changes to it. So my plan is to go ahead and do the first wave myself, and then start rolling it out to people, then doing stakeholder meetings across the state. My biggest concern is if I put a blank piece of document out there, that we'll just spend hours and hours and hours of chasing our tail trying to change things. So let me give you a starting point with no bias or no, if I put something out there and Dudley, you come back and you say it's crazy, Schmieder. Okay, it's crazy. It's no big deal. We can change it that time. So it's still going to take probably a couple years to get all the way through everything, but that's exactly what's going on. And I can tell you, I've been through 157.11. I got the definitions and all the other stuff, and then go back to 157.11 and spend some more time on it.
Alrighty. Any questions for Joe on the status of Chapter 157?
Just got that just now.
Who's that?
Trauma registry. That's a report that we asked for, but those are the numbers you said they are.
Oh, here, I'll let you, because that way you can understand your ciphering.
So Dudley was saying that there was, as of right now, there's less than 1,000 ambulance providers in Texas. So at the end of 2013, there were 1,006 providers in the state of Texas. 693 of those were MICU, 260 of those were BLS systems only, and 53 of those were ALS systems only. And that's what we're getting out of the trauma registry stuff. Do you want to just go skip to that report now?
Sure, you go ahead and give us your report, Mr. Petrilla.
I know Dudley loves trauma registry.
Absolutely.
So what we're looking at right now is why agencies and who are the agencies that are not reporting. It's been thought up until this last couple of months that it was a global problem, that people weren't reporting, that it was a very low number of services that were reporting. And what it's turning out to be is that the the 911 systems in the state of Texas are reporting. And you'll have to forgive me because I just got this report from Tammy and the folks over there at the Trauma Registry based off of a question that we asked. It looks like 70% of the services, it looks like about a third of the problem of the services that aren't reporting are transfer-only systems and not the 911 providers. And so I think we're kind of struggling with what data are we really looking for? Are we looking for the transfers, or are we really looking for the 911 systems? If we're looking for 911 systems, it looks like they are doing the reporting, and so that's a good thing for us, I think. And I apologize, like I said, I just got this report, and we're not going to talk about it until 11:30 and the committee meeting, so that's in like half an hour. So hopefully by the next meeting I'll have a better update for you and a plan for what we're going to do.
Brian, I would say that I think it is important that we look and see why aren't we getting that data. I think most people would agree that the biggest stress on the system is that interfacility transports. And I think it's important that we do collect that data, because that's the challenges that we're dealing with on an everyday basis. There's no doubt in our mind, if I have a car crash, I can get an ambulance without a doubt. But when I got to transport someone from one hospital to another, from a nursing home to a hospital, or whatever the case may be, that becomes the stress on the system. So I think as the committee looks at it, and I know Colin will be at the meeting, I think it's important to keep in mind that it's EMS, and that we should try to strive to collect all that data.
Right, and the reason I split it out was not because I'm trying to separate them.
Sure.
What I'm trying to get our arms around is where are the records not being reported from? And from the best I can tell right now, it's the transfer systems that aren't, the systems that only do transfers that aren't reporting, as opposed to the 911 system. So if you're looking for data about car crashes and things like that, seat belts, that kind of stuff, we're getting that data. If we're looking for the number of actual ambulance transports that are happening in the state of Texas, we're missing a huge piece of that puzzle, a huge piece. And we need to figure out why and how we can encourage these systems that primarily do transfers to report their information to us.
And I think one of the things we got to take into consideration, what should the number be? And I can only base it on history, looking at other states, and coming from a state with a population of 13 million into a state with a population of 26 million, we had 2.3 million PCRs. So then if you do that with the same amount of services and just to double the population, you got to think that we should be somewhere around 4 to 5 million PCRs annually in Texas. So, so I think that's another side of the issue here. Are we getting all of the data? And I think it's got to be our job from the office to show the providers the value of this data, because this data is going to drive our system forward in the future. And we got to do a better job in our newsletter and things like that of giving data back to the providers and to the personnel, so they see there's a value in what they're pushing forward.
So from the RAC level, they are gathering information now from the EMS providers of what they're looking for, what kind of reports do they want, what information is beneficial to them, so that Tammy and her office can push that information. I'm speaking for you, Tammy, so run to the mic at some point, please. At some point,
you're doing good, Brian.
At some point, we're going to be able to push that information back to the state. You know, I'm thinking of things like being able to say, what is the standard response time? What is a standard for response time? Because there's really not one in Texas, and we need to decide that by rural, super rural, urban,
Sure.
that kind of thing. But to even be more in depth, you know, what's the standard for patients that require a 12-lead EKG from the time of patient contact? What's that standard? I know we talk about that in our industry. We talk about, you know, 5 minutes, you know, from the time of patient contact to the first 12-lead. But what is the standard? Where's the bar at now, and are we meeting that? We have no idea.
Right.
And so that's the kind of information that we'd like to be able to send back. And I think the struggle we have is the name of what in the data that is being paid for, and that's trauma data only. Everything else that we're reporting is just kind of extra, and there's not a lot of support for that extra stuff that we can use.
So I think the data will help Texas. 49 of the states out of the 50, only Texas is the only one not reporting up to national data. And I think what's kind of interesting there is that in the future, we'll be able to actually compare ourselves to like systems in other states. I'm sure we have great systems because we all live here and it's a great system, but we're not comparing ourselves to somebody else in the like kind of systems. You know, it'll drive us. It'll drive us forward. It'll make the right changes.
And I think the biggest problem that we've faced over the years is that there's no carrot. There's not a carrot. There's no carrot for me as an EMS provider to push that data up there because I'm pushing up to it, and it looks like a black hole.
Sure.
And so I think that with HL7 coming, that's going to be a two-way street now between the hospital and the EMS. That's a big deal. That means that we're going to get outcome data. We're going to find out, you know, when we took a patient in that was complaining of abdominal pain and it turned out to be a STEMI, we're going to find out about it now. And we're going to know these things. And so I think with HL7 coming in a couple of years, and NEMSIS 3 about to happen, I think that our data sets are going to be better, and I think that when we get that two-way street of information back and forth between the hospital and EMS, I think that we're finally going to be able to have that carrot that you need to report because we need to be able to get this information back and forth.
And nationally, we're one of the few states that are actually getting hospital data. So where we might be behind on collecting stuff from EMS, we are way ahead of most states on the hospital side of it. So
On trauma, though.
on trauma, you're right. So you know, I just think we all have to keep a positive thought and realize that you're right. We got to have a carrot out there for the management of these organizations. And I know when I read the truck, it was like, oh, man, I really got to do this report. But it really will drive the industry forward.
When HL7 gets here, I think that's
Yeah.
we need to work towards that. And,
Yep.
and when we get there, having that information, being able to two-way street that information back and forth between the hospital and the EMS agency, that's going to be well worth anything that we've put through ourselves through in the last couple of years and moving forward. I think it's going to be interesting. I'm excited about that.
Cool.
Just to put it on everybody's radar, if we could just, even in your newsletter, get some blips from what the data is accomplishing.
Yep.
For example, last meeting, we heard how many helicopters are, how many medical helicopters are in Texas. Nobody in the room was able to guess. Can anybody guess what the average response time in the state of Texas is? Average transport time in the state of Texas? Those kinds of pieces of data, just as a little news blip out there in your newsletter, would at least pique interest. You know, give us something for rural, give us something for a metro area, and put it on the table where you're producing something. You're feeding us something back. Might not be exactly what we need, but we're seeing that you're operational, and that will be a big step, I think.
And we've had those meetings just earlier this week. Tammy and Colin and I all sat down. We had that same discussion. We need to be giving something back so people can see the value of it. I mean, when you look at the data, you know, probably 10 years ago, about 9% of your calls were after midnight, and it's about 20% now. So that changes your staffing schedules and making sure you have resources available and all those kind of things. And that's the kind of stuff managers need to know.
And Tammy, this
Wow, that's
report
huge.
that you just sent me,
Think about the
one,
volunteer, yes.
you know, I'm talking about the PowerPoint. I think that's awesome. That's something we should push out. This should be on the website somewhere.
Put it on
for
the
people to
website.
see. This is great information. I'm just trying to digest it because it's hard to.
I think it does two things. Not only does it help folks who aren't sending in data or contemplating if they should or what value is it to me to maybe excite them a little bit to see how they can benchmark against others and kind of that is there. But for those who may be a little more jaded about EMS and trauma registry history in Texas, I think it helps us break that crust off and go, holy moly, it may actually be working. Sure. So, you know, so I think it accomplishes two things and makes it more positive. So
I'm excited just because this is the first time that I've ever known that there were 1,006 providers in Texas. That, you know, the vast majority of those were MICU providers, which I wouldn't have guessed. That, you know, BLS is only 200. There's only 260 BLS systems out there. I really thought that number was going to be a lot higher. That surprised me. So that's just a part of data. That's great. I love it. I love the fact that we're doing this.
Ms. Tammy, please.
I just wanted to give kudos to my new epidemiologist who put that work together for you, Nate. His name is Chris Drucker, and he is here today and will be at our work group. Chris, you want to stand up?
Absolutely, he does. Well, he doesn't want to, but he's going to. There he is. Woo!
And a lot of this data, I also like to thank Joe and his group, because the same file that Dudley was speaking of from regulatory about the licensed EMS agencies, we used that file, and we then linked that to the EMS Trauma Registry to find out how many records that each of those agencies are reporting. So we are working on a template for an EMS report, and this is based on the work we've been doing for the RAC-D project. We'll be sharing with the Trauma Registry Work Group the hospital template that we created, and in May we can share the EMS template as well. So we'll have two templates. One is based on analyzing the data at the RAC level, and the other one will be for the individual EMS agency so that they can just look at their own data. So I think that this will be a good starting point because, as Brian mentioned, there's been a lot of input about what sorts of things people might want to have in a report. So this one's mostly based on what RAC-D has indicated they'd like to have in a report. And of course, it can be modified to take into considerations feedback when we share that with the rest of the RACs. So once you have the code, for instance, for the hospital RAC report, we're going to be running that same report for all 22 RACs and distributing that out to them within the next 1 to 2 weeks. So as soon as you have it, all the things in place for running a report, it's easy to generate them. So I just wanted to let you know there's a little bit of hope there, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel for being able to see the data that you're discussing today. Any other questions or anything for me?
There's one other piece of data that could be very useful besides just the RAC data and my individual service data, and that's data from like services. Mm-hmm. So I run 10,000 calls, I transport 6,000 patients. You as a state level have the ability to pull together services that fall into whatever parameter you want to use. So I can look at other services of similar size and what their capability is.
Okay.
That would be throughout the state rather than just within my RAC. So
Right.
that third piece of data would be very useful for me as a local service to decide, am I in the right place? Am I doing really well? What do I need to improve on?
Right, so we could do volume, and then we could also use the type of EMS agency that you are, like Brian was discussing, ALS, BLS, all that sort of stuff, so that we are comparing, sort of the same things to each other. We want to make sure we're doing that, because volume could be different. It could be the same, but then everything else could be different. So I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Anything else for Tammy or Brian? All right, thanks for that. And where's y'all is y'all's 11:30 meeting in the PAWFA program around the corner? All right.
Here's something interesting. 85% of the, yeah, I know this. 85% of the 911 calls in the state of Texas were handled by an MICU unit. 9% of them were handled by a BLS unit, and 6% were handled by an ALS unit. I'm sorry, BLS splits those around. That's interesting. That's pretty cool. That's just some of the information that we're getting out of this, and I'm excited about this. So the naysayers will.
Well, thank you for being the naysayer who volunteered or got voluntold to report and help with that work group. So
pretty soon we're going to start getting tweets from Brian with little data
I
updates.
know.
Interesting fact.
Everybody will be following Brian for the EMS data issues. Justin, if you could give us a report. We're back. So for those following the roadmap, we're back to number 5. Report from the work group examining patient care issues when air, medical, and ground agencies are on the scene.
So we finally we submitted some questions to Joe that originated from that work group and the air medical committee. And I know Shirley's here or was here. If she wants to come address those. And Joe's here. I got a copy of this, and I know that there's going to be some discussion on. It's an agenda item for the air medical committee late this afternoon. Joe, do you want to talk about that document, or do you want me to talk about that document, or?
You know, I can just tell you the process. It was questions that came over to DSHS, I think before I got here or soon after I got here.
Before you got here.
And then we put together some answers and responded and gave them back to the Air Committee back in November. So I think the overarching question was what happens if a service coming into Texas did some bad care or something like that? What do they do with that kind of information? And the recommendation was it would go back to the state that send the air ambulance in here, and it should be a communication with us or go through the QA process within the facility or the organization to make sure that it's addressed at that level. I think it's all talking about better communications. And I'm shooting from my hip on this one on some of the other questions, but I think that was the big arching one. I think the other question that's floating out there all the time is, can I do some education in Oklahoma, Louisiana, whatever, and make it count toward Texas? And I can tell you that, as I said in November, the state directors are from each of those states are on that same page, not thinking there's a problem here. We now have to work with each of our attorneys to make sure that they agree with it. Slow process, but you know, I think the overarching answer is, yeah, it should count, and we could make it work and all that kind of stuff. Now, can we legally make it work? That's the harder question here. So did I hit the highlights pretty good?
Well, and some of the things, and I'll
Okay.
spur your memory. There were some questions that was presented about when we talk about the patient care report on transporting flight crews and flight services when we're doing inter-facility transports. Let's just say on fixed wings, where you go out and pick up the flight crew and go pick up the patient. And one of the questions posed was, is it okay to document on the ground ambulance's run report care being performed by flight crew, and just wash it at that? And the direction that your phone's going off, Timmy. The direction that was given from the state was that, and in fact, that can't happen. That run report on the ground ambulance has got to be detailed in what would be required in any run. Patient's name, condition, vital signs, and all of everything that's listed in 157.11 under what the definition of a PCR is. So I think there'll be some education, some learning that exists on that relationship and who's responsible or who has the patient. The other thing is, it talked about we really wanted to examine the relationship between out-of-state air medical providers that were flying into Texas and getting on the back of Texas ambulances. And the response that we got in that question was, while it's okay for a patient to be delivered to Texas by any provider, if they come within the geographical bounds of the state of Texas to pick up a patient, they will have a Texas license. It is actually written in statute that you pick somebody up here, you have a license. I don't know how they're going to monitor that. I don't know how they're going to police that.
Well, there's 63,000 EMS cops out there that will obviously inform us when that doesn't happen. I think the real message there is that if you're picking up in Texas, you need a license unless it's mutual aid. If we don't have a resource to provide that care, then you know, it's in best care of the patient to get the person to the facility the best way possible. And I'm calling that mutual aid. But if it's regularly scheduled, you're picking up in Texas, then you need to have a license in Texas. You can deliver in Texas without a license. You cannot pick up in Texas. And that's not unique to Texas. That is pretty much national standard.
So Dudley, maybe something that we need to look at and consider is that this document that we have talks about the responsibility of the transferring facility and transferring physician in regards to the MOT and what's on the MOT. I think there could be some possibilities, concerns that exist when the transferring physician wants to call that out-of-state provider and they come into Texas, and now the ground ambulance is sitting kind of in a quandary of what do we do with this crew that's not supposed to be here, but the transferring physician says this is the way he's going, and I think it could get jammed up pretty quick, and I don't.
Well, I think the quick answer to that is treat the patient. We'll fix the problem after the fact. So if something's wrong, unless it's so unsafe, let's just treat it and get the patient to where they need to get to, and then we need to work it out.
Let me, is there anybody from Dumas here? Okay, I was born and raised there, so maybe I'm the closest we got. I'll use that so that it's kind of agnostic to anybody around the table or in the audience. So, Joe, I think the question that comes up and what Justin may have been dancing around a little bit about there is the doctor says, okay, we're going to transfer this patient. I want him transferred by fixed wing. The hospital reaches out, however they do that, whatever mechanism they have, however that occurs, we're going to use fixed wing service X. We're going to use Petrilla fixed wing service. They're out of Colorado. And so they call them, but Colorado to Dumas is not really that far away. And so they call them, and they come jetting in. There's a fixed wing service in Lubbock. There's a fixed wing service in Dallas, Fort Worth, Wichita Falls, wherever else. And so they call them, they come down. Dumas EMS shows up at the airport to take the flight crew. They see that the name of the company and the name on the side of the plane says Colorado. And they ask, are you licensed in Texas? And they say, no, we're not. And so they take them to the hospital. They pick the patient up and they go back. And then Dumas calls and says, hey, man, this just happened. And we think you guys need to be aware of it. And calls by calling DSHS. And I know it's a bad example for those in the Panhandle because Dumas EMS is part of the hospital and they would probably never do that for fear of losing their job and all that other stuff. But anyway, I think the concern is that, and what you're saying by treat the patient is let's take care of the patient that's there now. It's already happened. The aircraft is here. The patient's sick. The patient needs to go somewhere. We have the means to make that happen. Let it happen. I think the assurances the ground side wants is that when that goes through the regulatory process, is the ground guys going to be somehow held responsible for being a part of that transfer process? Because we toted the flight crew, we knew better because now we have a document telling us they can't do that, yet we still participated in moving the patient. And I think that's the concern some of these agencies have on these border areas where this is happening, is that somehow they are going to be left on the hook for that, or they're going to be held responsible, even though it's the physician who's ultimately responsible by law for choosing that means of transportation.
And it's all I can say to address that is we've had that discussion within DSHS since I've been here anyway. And the rule is, the position is, just get the patient to where they need to go and we'll clean it up afterwards. And we still question them, probably, to try to get the history and all that kind of stuff. But we got to use a little common sense here and make sure that we're not doing more harm than good to the patient. So it's all I can say, Dudley, is I can't talk.
Because it's case by case. I mean, each one has its own.
Right. And I can't talk for what happened, 8 months ago or a year ago, 10 years ago, whatever the case may be. I can only say that if someone feels like they're being prosecuted during this process, pick up the phone, call me, and or call Jane, or call Kathy, or call somebody, and we'll intervene to see what we can do to help.
Okay. And then you guys have the ability through your organization to then turn around and file that complaint back with Colorado? Or how does that, so they come out of Denver, and how do they get in trouble because they're not licensed in Texas, in Colorado?
Well, we'd go through our legal process because they're providing EMS without a license in Texas, so we could, bring charges against them. Obviously, we would reach out to Colorado or whoever. I mean, we have those rapports, and my goal would be is let's keep working it to see what why is this going on. I don't know how frequently it's happening. It might be happening a whole lot up there in the Panhandle. I don't know, but we're going to work it and help the ground providers here. But the one thing I don't want to see, and I know Jane doesn't want to see, is let's not argue at the scene trying to decide if it's right or not. Let's just get the person to a hospital and then let's fix it.
It happens a lot more than I think you think, because you have this patient in the hospital that's going to be transferred out, and they need to be fixed wing to wherever they're going to go.
Sure.
It's not like they're calling a 1-800 number, and they're getting a clearinghouse for flights. You may be a flight service in Texas, but honestly, what ends up happening is they sell the flight. they purchase the flight, they say it's going to cost you this much money, and then they sell it to somebody cheaper to do the flight. And that flight, the crew comes from anywhere. They could be on a deadhead leg back from somewhere else, and they bid on that flight. So I think it happens a lot more than what we really think. I mean, I know in the medical center you see it a lot in Houston.
So I can say someone needs to be telling us. They need to pass it up and let us know so we can do our homework on it.
This might be another good topic for, I mean, we're going to fill this little electronic newsletter to the brim, but to address here in this next year, because I tell you the stories I hear from RAC A and B and from some folks out in the border RAC out around El Paso and just on the borders of the state, it seems to be, especially in the rural areas and the frontier areas out there, is that this is kind of like the new phase of cowboy EMS. You know, it was with the fraudulent guys in Houston and the Valley for a while, and we've kind of tried to rope around that and trying to get that under control. And this seems like, I mean, I've heard stories of some really questionable things, both with out-of-state providers coming in as well as in-state providers trying to find a market niche, and how they're going about doing that are just a little disturbing. And so I think maybe cleaning this up, having Justin and the air medical guys that are working on this together, Justin and Eddie and the air medical guys that are working on this together, clean that question sheet up, let you guys maybe address it and say, hey, this has come up at the GTAC level, and you guys need to know that if that provider's from out of state, you need to let us know. Take care of the patient, but let us know after the fact that you're routinely seeing or you have seen this out-of-state provider come in, so that you guys can start addressing that issue before it blows up and becomes a big issue.
And that's the most important part. Tell us. Someone's got to pick up the phone or drop us an email or something so that we have a place to start.
Well, and I think coming from you and coming from DSHS will help that. As much as we go around saying we need more cops, nobody really likes to call the cops when it was an incident they were involved in, because there is that fear that they're going to get smacked as well. And so I think sharing some of this information and talking about the fact that we don't want to impede patient care, but we do need to know these are happening so that we can figure out how to better control them and get it make it happen in the right way in Texas in the future. I think will hopefully ease some of those fears. Then it gives RAC directors and EMS directors in those areas a little bit of information to turn to their fellow peers and say, you need to call. You need to call somebody and tell them about this. I think that would help. Anyway, my opinion. I don't want anybody else.
A good item for the newsletter might be a list of all of the fixed wing providers that are licensed in Texas. I mean, I wouldn't even begin to know where to even look for something like that.
Sure.
Because if I needed a flight, I would probably look on the internet for aeromedical fixed wing 1-800 number. Get me where I got to go.
You can call your friends in the air medical industry. They'd help you out.
I know.
And I know Shirley's in the room. I don't know if Shirley, you want to say something or address? I know because it affects your committee.
No, we are going to discuss it.
Oh.
You're going to make her walk all
I'm
the way
going to
up
make her
here
walk
to say
all
no.
the way up here to say no, she doesn't want to talk right now, and to come this afternoon at 4 o'clock.
No, and then go sit down.
No, thank you. No, we are going to discuss it in the Air Medical Committee. And, of course, we got these, we got this page in November that had the answers to our questions in here. I've been kind of going over it and studying it, and I've come up with some extra questions, that we're going to just kind of put with this, because it does, the answers do bring up some more questions.
Mm-hmm.
And just like, it's difficult to self-report if you are looking at getting in trouble yourself. So I think, the assurance that a reporting service is not going to be held liable or not going to get their teeth kicked in, if they do transport a service that shouldn't be picking up in Texas, just that assurance alone is going to help, I think, make everybody feel a little better.
Sure.
So we'll just continue on with the process.
Okay.
And the answer to the questions were really very literate. We answered the question that was asked, and there were so many times I looked at the question, I thought, well, they're probably trying to get to this, but not knowing the history, we literally just answered what was asked. If it said, was this a red apple, we said yes. I mean, we try to keep it very black and white like that.
Yes, and we all appreciate
Sure.
getting the answers to these questions, because I think that will help us move forward with what we need to do. So thank you very much.
You know, Dudley, this is something at a RAC level we need to address as well, because I guarantee you most CEOs of these hospitals don't know this is happening. If we push out lists of providers to the CEOs at the RAC levels, this can, I won't say it'll end, but it'll sure decrease without a doubt.
Sure.
Well, at least make them aware of it.
Well, and Dudley, I don't know if you've paid attention to the agenda for the medical directors meeting or committee. There's an agenda item, and I don't have it on top of my head, that's talking about exactly what you discussed in fixed wing services and being used for lack of a better word, non-emergent issues. And so that's another meeting that's going to pop into as well. And the medical directors are actually a part of this work group too that helped formulate the questions. So it's been a 3-committee process that we realize it's taken a couple years, but we've gotten there and we've gotten some answers and we'll continue to press.
Well, and I think you guys need to continue to meet and reformulate these new questions. I mean, I don't think we've cracked the nut yet, you know, and just hearing Shirley up here talk, and, you know, I mean, there's other issues there too, you know. I mean, the competitive nature of the air medical industry is one where an agency, a rotor agency may have a fixed wing component, and they know that this is going on, that they're calling a service in from out of state, but they're hard pressed to call and report that facility because they have competition on the rotor side of the market, and they know that facility or that doctor will no longer call them for those rotor head transports, and so or rotor transports. So, sorry, and so that was a little slip, wasn't it? But anyway. So, I mean, there's all these pressures coming on that I think if we could address it in this group format, and even though some of it seems like, well, you know, I know they're trying to ask what flavor apple, but they just ask, is it an apple or not? I think we need to do this back and forth revision 2 or 3 times to kind of crack that nut a little bit until they can really get it drilled down to the point where they can get enough meat on the bones to be able for people to be more comfortable. So, I think we'll just keep that. And Justin, I mean, my suggestion would be. With the Air Medical Committee and the medical directors is we keep pushing. You know, we take these questions, we see what's answered, what's not been answered, we reformulate, we clarify, we try to drill down a little bit more, and then let's go back to Joe and see if we can continue to hack away at this till we get everything answered we can think of. All righty. So we did that. Is Victor in the room? There he is. Look at that. Victor, I'll let you give us a quick update. Victor's going to update us on Emergency Medical Task Force. And we've been for those of you who came to the disaster meeting, you saw this already or heard some of it. But we've had him on our agenda for a while. He's come in a couple of times, and I really would like him to become kind of a regular part of our agenda just to update us on what's going on with EMTF. Pre-hospital transport is a critical piece of the Emergency Medical Task Force concept. And a lot of folks don't have the time to be involved at the disaster committee and everything else. So I think if we can give a quick report here, I think it will help all of us be better prepared and take that information back.
Okay, perfect. Give me 1 second, see if I can get this presentation back up. And with that, I say, committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come in and talk with y'all. I'm excited to share with y'all about EMTF and what we're doing. And in the future, I'll actually look to write a different presentation to cater more specifically to this group of questions and things that y'all might have. So for today, the one that I shared with the group this morning.
Hey, Victor, can you pull that mic just a touch closer? You're pretty loud, but you're pointing at us. So. Look at that.
All right. So the EMTF, we've been busy, and that's one of the things I was really proud this morning I talked to the group about is the relationship that we're establishing with the air medical providers in Texas for disaster deployment. Something they've been working on for quite some time is putting together a disaster deployable MOA. So we partnered with them and were able to pull together, the template was the Texas EMTF MOA, merge the air medical information into it, and now have the proposed, which we'll be reviewing with them later today. It's already been through dishes. Everyone's in agreement that it's looking good right now, that we actually have an MOA, and it's between the SCO, so that not every region is trying to sign a disaster MOA with their air medical providers. It's all the air medical providers in Texas will sign an MOA with the SCO or the EMTF State Coordination Office. That way they're deployable from a central area, so if we need them for a disaster. So that's a big milestone for us. We're very excited that we've been able to pull that together. The aeromedical guys have done a great job of providing us with the information so that we could just convert their words into our document and created a joint document, which we're excited has come together. Additionally, one of the things that we've been doing, and actually I've had conversations with Chief Kidd since this morning when I presented this is the EMSAT. The satellite radio communications that exist around Texas. Some different agencies have it, but we look at it as a real solid disaster communications tool, and there's a lot of them that are out there. So we started within EMTF of saying, let's start talking on them, let's start using them, let's make sure that they're working. So I pulled together the third Wednesday of the month, every month at 13:30, we're checking the radios. This morning, Chief Kidd asked me to go ahead and start engaging the district coordinators from TDM, engage the SOC. We're going to start pulling those guys in. And if you haven't talked on satellite radio, it's a little different. You got to remember, push it, wait for it to click, it beeps twice, then talk. So just the fact that the guys are getting to talk on it at least once a month is making people more comfortable. And the fact that they're knocking the dust off of them, they may actually talk to each other. One of our regions has put them together and put them in in their primary vehicles so they can talk to each other on a day-to-day basis. So we're taking some technology that's been there, it's been a little bit stagnant, maybe a little dusty, and we're knocking the dust off of it. These are the areas that last month I was able to talk to. All of these guys were able to talk to me. I was sitting in my car with my portable plugged into the cigarette lighter just to test it, and I talked to El Paso, Lubbock, Sherman, Paris, Houston, and the Valley, all from a parking lot. Now, what also happened, it allowed all these guys to talk to each other. So the guys in the Valley are talking to the guys in El Paso and Lubbock at the same time. So as Chief Kidd asked me an hour or so ago, we're going to engage the SOC now. We're going to engage the district coordinators. So we'll have every region all coming together to start doing this test that we're doing third Wednesday of the month. So we're excited about that communication.
If there are agencies in the room, or folks in the room know of agencies that are interested in acquiring some of this equipment for their own either local or deployment use, who would you recommend they get with to make sure that they get what they need and not what the salesman tells them?
Absolutely. Yeah, if they just want to send that to me, you can send it to me directly at my email, or you can use the link on the back of tdms.org. The TDMS website has a Contact Us section. The magic of that is if you type something and hit send, it comes to me. So tdms.org is a website that'll get that to me, or just send it to victor.wells@strac.org, and then I'll help get them that information. These are the other MSATs that are in acquisition. So you see there are a lot more stars than this. These guys are up and talking. We've done this now for 4 months now. These are the guys that have ordered more stuff, and so each one of those stars is an MSAT that I know that is on the way. Ambulance staging managers. Our last GTAC, we brought in the ASTLs from around the state, started having communications with them, established a list server. So if there's anybody here that's an ASTL that's not on that list, they can drop me their name. I'll add them to the ambulance strike team leader list serve. So we realized that we didn't have a good way of talking to all the strike team leaders across the state, and we've trained hundreds and hundreds. So that list is out, it's in play, little conversations starting, and then outside of that, the next step is the ASM. So we're hosting this class in Galveston. It's next week. It went out to all the EMTF regions. Each region started out with 4 slots to fill. So if you're in one of your areas, you don't know, talk to your EMTF coordinator. Contact me if you have a question and don't know how to get a hold of, who the appropriate person is to see if those slots are filled. If you've got somebody from your area that you'd like to go to the ASM. We're trying to spread this around so that although it's in Galveston, the availability is for all 8 regions, so everybody gets a seat at the table. So that's a 36-person class, and we're filling it up. It's almost full. That's in Galveston, 18 and 19, and then a missed class in March 25 and 6. We'll hold that in Arlington, same scenario. One of the things we've done with the MMU is tracking equipment to try to get things standardized across the state, and we realized the biggest deficit we had was awareness. People didn't know what they didn't know. So you didn't know that you needed 2 ventilators. Well, I started working this list saying the green boxes are good. It's hard to see the yellow ones, but the yellows are, you got some, but you're not quite there yet. The red boxes is what governance said, well, this is the minimum. This is what you need. So this is 5 of 13 last year. This is today. The coordinators and the regions and the RACs and the EMTFs are very excited that they're making their red boxes go away. That's the whole goal. Identify what we need. Let's work together. We'll find a way to fund it and make it happen. And this is the tool we've used. Because it's been successful here, we've now started it with our ambulance equipment. We realized that we talked about ambulance bumpers and cages and stuff like that. Driver's AC. We didn't realize who had the supplemental driver's AC. So I started tracking it to figure it out. And more importantly, one of the things that Dudley touched this morning, the next to the bottom row down there, is ambus replacement. Do you have your ambus in a vehicle replacement plan? Because in 6, 8, 10 years, it needs to be replaced in some way. Are you thinking about it now? So these types of things that we're tracking, and we found that just awareness, simply looking at it regularly and talking about it, is helping us to remember that, oh yeah, I need to do that. So that's what we're working on with the ambus guys as well. And Eric announced this morning that we've secured funding to do a retrofit on some ambulance stretcher slides, which had proved problematic. So we're going to get those fixed now. So that was a good score. WebEOC, we continue to focus on WebEOC around the state. If you don't know it, each of the 8 EMTF regions has a primary WebEOC server already identified. Each region has that. So some of your people, if they need a pathway, they need to hook up with their EMTF coordinator, get them into their WebEOC. Most of them have a backup server, and then we actually have a tertiary server called Lone Star that we can bring people in if we need to. South Padre is our next big mission that we're working on now, deploying to South Padre with a Type 1 MMU. 5 of the MTF regions will be working together for that. Last year, in the time that we'll be there for 4 days, last year they treated 314 patients and transported 72 of those off the island. This is the footprint we'll be doing. This is the MMU set up in the parking lot, Chapel by the Sea on South Padre. It's on the very south end. And typing document just showing that we're sending a Type 1, that's a 35-person team. The next weekend we'll be supporting the Baton Memorial Death March. EMTF 9, 1, and 4 will be doing that with a Type 1. Last year they treated 395 patients in 12 hours. This year the temperature is supposed to be 11 degrees warmer. They're expecting the potential that that impact may be doubled. Year before they saw almost 700. The chances are that they very well may hit that number or more again this year. That's my quick update. Questions for me?
Questions for Victor? Any questions from the audience for Victor? Some of you may have been second time. Come on up real quick. I see a hand.
Victor, while she's coming out, what's the dates for South Padre? I probably should know
11 through 16.
Okay, thanks.
We mobilize on the 11th, driving down and set the equipment up. We'll tear down on the 16th and come home.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Esther Salinas with Elite Critical Care EMS. As you probably remember me, I'm one of your station managers, strike team leaders, and MES members. When are you going to have your refresher courses for those classes?
Good question.
That is a great question. You know, last GTAC, I let the cat out of the bag when I told them when the refresher was and said, well, we're going to marry this up to TDEM. And Chief said, that's awesome. You heard it here first. No one had that date until now. What we did identify at that point was that the date that we'd selected was Mother's Day. So, because...
Oh, you're done.
Yeah, well, I'm just seriously in trouble. So the date for the refresher has not been firmed up right now. We believe it will be in coordination with the governor's display, which is typically the first day of June. So it'll be that Friday prior to the June 1st is when we believe that we'll have the course. 3 days prior to that, we don't have a location.
All right. Tammy said you moved it to around Father's Day.
It probably will fall on Father's Day now.
Not quite. All righty. Anything else for Victor? All right. Last thing we have on the number agenda items before we get to general public comment is possible agenda items from committee members for the next meeting. And there's one I'd like to bring up. I was going to do it under public comment, but I think it really applies here because I think we need to bring this up as a work group. And Joe, this is one of those things that kind of has a history. A few years ago, I was looking at putting in for a local project grant, and I wanted to put it in for an ambulance. And because the state of Texas gives around $35,000 towards the purchase of a new ambulance. And in filling out the document, to get the grant, I discovered that it had some cost things in there that the ambulance I was hoping to get did not fall within. And so we brought it up here and we talked about maybe it was too late to do it that year on the local project grant, and I would imagine it's too late to do anything on it in the local project grant that'll be coming out very soon this year, because that usually comes out around April or May if I'm not mistaken. But that is, I think we need to, I have a desire for the committee to discuss and maybe discuss with you and the other folks at DSHS exactly what those local project grants are, what the goals are as envisioned by DSHS, and kind of what the stakeholders feel those goals are. Because right now, the process, it works for a lot of people, but it also has some parts in it that I think are, I don't want to say antiquated, but I don't know if they meet the needs of the EMS community today. And I say that, and I'll give some examples. Many years ago, we did apply for a local project grant, and our agency wanted to move to the tracked stair chairs of whatever flavor you think you want to get. And so those cost around $3,500, $4,000, let's say, or at least maybe they did back then. And so we put in, knowing that they were more than $1,000, we'd have to have a 50% match. We could come up with the 50% match. So we put in to buy these stair chairs. DSHS award said, yes, you can get your stair chairs, and here's $350 per stair chair for you to go get your stair chairs. And I was like, well, wait a minute, we want a $3,500 stair chair, 50% match. And what I discovered about the local project grant at the time, and now it's in the RFP process, so this is probably more clear for other people, is that DSHS has established a maximum reimbursement or a maximum value of equipment that they will give local project grants for. And so for a stair chair, it's currently $700. And other items, such as an ambulance stretcher, are $4,000. And as you get into the more expensive equipment, a couple of my favorites are for an ambulance new. They say the basic market value for a new ambulance is $70,000. You can't buy a Type 2 for $70,000. You just can't do it. The max reimbursement is $35,000. I don't think anybody has a problem with the max reimbursement of $35,000. But some folks in their service area, for whatever reason, and we're always the one that gets picked on because we have giant ambulances, or we're used to, but we do a lot of customization in our units for safety, putting forward-facing seats and those type of things, and then those ambulances are more expensive. And I would do anything to get a little help and knock $35,000 off of that, so I can budgetarily afford these very expensive, safe ambulances for my staff to ride in. But they don't fall within that perceived value. The other one, the big one, and it's kind of how this came back on my radar, is powered stretchers. And powered stretchers are north of $10,000, and the state says the maximum value is $4,000, and they'll reimburse a maximum of $2,000, which could handicap some folks who really want those powered stretchers to help reduce workplace injuries in their volunteers and their small staffs out in the rural and frontier areas. It doesn't help them get those products within their reach, and so. I had a thought that maybe there were 2 or 3 different ways we could discuss as between the department and stakeholders. I think there's a myriad of ways the local project. I think it's great right now, and one of the ideas I have as a possible way to update it could damage some of the good things about it. So it's a very, very good program for the rural and frontier areas. But I really would think. I came down with basically 3 ways to maybe improve it. One is get a group of stakeholders together to help you update those values, and technologically, where is the equipment and what is it that EMS agencies are attempting to acquire with these, so that the value is fairly represented. I think another option would be for folks to put in their local project grant, and that it stands on its own merits of how that grant application is put in. And so if I say I need $35,000 towards a new ambulance, and my new ambulance is going to be $200,000, and here's the reason why I'm spending $200,000, and here's the reasons why I'm spending I need $35,000 from you guys to make this happen and help. That needs to stand on its own merits in comparison to all the other local project grant applications. And not that, well, we're not going to fund you to purchase a $200,000 ambulance, so you're not getting anything. And then the last idea would be then to do something like a lot of the folks in this room deal with on other grants at the federal level, such as the assistance to firefighters, where the state sets a set of priorities, ideally with stakeholder input, but the state would set a list of priorities, and then how you address those priorities could potentially assign whether or not that grant is funded or not. I think there's some other pieces to this. I think if we get away from this list, I think there'll be less local project grants because there's going to be more money going to smaller groups of people, if that makes sense. If you give me $10,000 for new stretchers instead of $2,000 for new stretchers, that's going to lower the pool. But I think there's some ways to address that as well. So I'm willing to take this to GTAC. I'd like to hear the thoughts of the committee on this. And when we get to public comment next, if anybody wants to talk on it from the audience. But Joe, I'd kind of like to hear maybe your thoughts and then the thoughts of the committee on this future agenda item.
Sure. I think, it's always good to look at processes and determine, are they still current with meeting today's needs? And you touched right on, Dudley, what the biggest issue is. The more we increase, the less what people get. So I would strongly support, let's, put together a little task force or whatever, get together, let's look at it, and let's make some recommendations and get GTAC's approval and move in that direction. I don't know the last time someone even looked at the process. Let's look at it. It doesn't hurt.
Thoughts from the committee?
I think Eddie would like to be on that.
Good call. Somewhere he's in a stock pen somewhere and he just got a lot of back pain.
See, that's just not fair.
I agree, Dudley. There are several safety or even, if you would, injury prevention items that we could get for our own staff or volunteers that are very, very expensive, that most people can't afford, but it would behoove all of us to really look at it. And a lot of people aren't able to look at the safety issues that we all need to look at and the more expensive things that you do with your ambulances because we can't afford them. And so we're not able to do the safe things for our own staff that we ought to be able to do.
Sure.
Well, and Dudley or Joe, I'd be interested to know when the values for those items were set. And if there's any language that exists in those that talks about renewing or looking at the upgrades or the installation costs and stuff like that. Because that's kind of where we're hitting on is that we still providing the services, but new technology and inflation has caused us pain.
Well, this is the document that I guess it's contracting, I call it the RFP division at DSHS, but this is the document they prepared for the 2013. And you can look through this list. It's available on the website out there. I'd be happy to share it with anybody that wants it just because I have it in email because somebody shared it with me. But some of the things have been updated. They have cardiac compression devices with a basic market value of $15,000. That's spot on, maybe even a little high. And they'll do 50% of that. And so some of those things get updated, some of those things don't get updated, or haven't been, or either there's a feeling you can still get an ambulance, and it says ambulance new or used for $70,000, and so I know that they're not necessarily going by that guidance because I know the agencies that have gotten $35,000 to buy new ambulances, and I've seen their ambulances, and those ambulances didn't cost $70,000, and they didn't cost less than $100,000, which was in grant guidance one year. They're $140,000, $150,000 ambulances. And so I know that money's being given. It's not necessarily being held back because their ambulance costs more than $70,000, which leads to another question. So I don't know. It's a complicated thing. I think it's going to take us a little bit of time. But if the committee sees value in it, I think we need to try to tackle it.
I agree. I think we need to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We'll see what the audience has to say too. And any other from the committee, any other upcoming agenda items we need to look at?
Yeah, I have one. We're, I don't know how many months into the moratorium now, and I know DSHS has talked about maybe kind of giving some guidance on what the letter of need needs to look like for cities that when they get approved. But the biggest question the cities are having is how do we know how many ambulances we need in our city? And they're really looking for some guidance. I've gotten contacted by some needing some guidance. Is there a formula? Is there some kind of process? How in the world do we figure out how many ambulances we need in order to say that, you know, we're going to grant this letter of need? Because the way that wording is written, they're kind of in a no-win situation. If they don't give it, they're going to upset this person and they're liable to want to come at the city for, you know, you're not allowing more business. Yet it also has that wording that it won't impact any existing companies. So if they just give it to everybody, now existing companies can come at them going, hey, according to law, you can't have a negative impact. So they kind of feel caught between a rock and a hard spot, really looking for some guidance. I don't know if I know from what I've been able to look at, I can't find anything truly existing for that guidance. So I don't know if this is something that some bigger brains are going to have to get together and try to work on.
Sure. And I've been in communication with the County Association of Texas, and we're going to be meeting sometime in the next couple of weeks or whatever and start working our way through this. I have been given a directive from Assistant Commissioner to make to get a report going with the counties as well as the League of Governments to assist them in this process. I don't know there's any really good standard out there that says for 100,000 people you need X ambulances. It's really going to come down to what is the municipality going to put up with or determine what the need is. So our position is we're going to work with the League of Governments and the county associations to try to assist them in developing some kind of a standards. But I don't know there's any real big standards out there nationally on what is acceptable.
All right, we'll put that down. Justin?
So maybe a hot topic, I don't know. Texas went through accreditation and we decided that's what was best. In my part of the state, being surrounded by other states, we deal with reciprocity issues and how that works. Well, currently there's a policy that I ran across when one of my people were trying to get reciprocity in Texas that said that in order to have reciprocity, you must be licensed in the other state before reciprocity is available. I would really like to look at that. I don't know if it needs to come from this group or the education group or some group about looking at that policy or even with Joe and now that we have accreditation and that's the great thing, do we really want to require reciprocity rules say that you have to be licensed in the other state first? Because I've got people that are going across the state lines and getting the classes, becoming national registry, and the state is now telling me without a waiver or jumping through some hoops that you're going to have to be licensed or certified in that other state before you can get reciprocity. And they live in Texas.
That would also include returning military, correct? Because they're nationally registered.
Well, returning military are addressed in that policy.
Military is addressed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
Texas
it's more of this.
We're trying to take care of the military. And for those in the room, what Justin's saying is up in his neck of the woods, where he is in Spearman, he's closer to other out-of-state educational facilities than he is to the ones that are present in the Panhandle. And so he has personnel that it's easier for them to go to, say, Oklahoma to take their course. They get nationally registered. They get their national registry certificate. And there's been some issues because of pre-accreditation policies that they need to get their Oklahoma patch before they can reciprocity over into Texas. And so, Joe, I don't know your thoughts on that. Is that something that we need to discuss as a committee with stakeholders, or is that something that you can work? What's your thoughts on that?
So we need, and Anthony and I have already had a lot of discussion on this. We need to get legal involved to see what we legally can say. Joe Schmieder only, not DSH policy. Why couldn't National Registry be the 51st state? If you have that, and then you go through the background check and all that kind of stuff like you do here.
Yeah.
Legally, can that happen? I don't know. So we're going to work through legal, and I think Justin will address the concerns you have. I don't know that we need a task force or someone to tell us I kind of agree, we gotta figure out how to make it legal.
Okay. Is that good, Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, just maybe get a report back from Joe.
Yeah, put on your
Next-
agenda
next
and
meeting.
we'll keep it alive here.
Okay.
Joe, as you're looking at that, one thing I'd encourage you to look at is the folks who have been nationally registered, went through another state that's accredited, have been nationally registered, maybe let it drop, as a lot of people do after their first recertification period, and then try to move here. Some accommodation for folks who have been nationally registered but aren't currently, but are current in another state, particularly if that state is using registry as their exam. It seems somewhat silly to require them to go back through and do another national registry exam when they've come from a state where they've taken a registry exam and just happened to have let it drop. It's another gap there that might be worth looking at as you're looking at the process.
Sure.
We'll just put it as certification issues with national registry, reciprocity and certification issues. That'd be
Is
good.
that something that we need to ask education about too, or just Joe?
Yep.
And I can, to address Justin's question, we're looking at it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can have another committee tell us to look at it. We're already looking at it.
We'll let them know that we're bringing it up. We're going to talk
Sure.
about it and get reports from you on a regular basis, and then it won't hopefully be two committees asking you the same question. Anything else from this group? Let's open the floor up for general public comment. Can be on anything on the agenda, anything not on the agenda. Come and speak your mind.
Hi, I'm Christine Reeves with Hot Rack out of Waco. If y'all put together a stakeholder group to look at the LPG grant, I'd like to see at least have one rack administrator or executive director, because in some of the smaller racks, we become the LPG administrator for several of our rural services to do one large project. So we may have a different viewpoint to bring to the table.
And that was actually one of the things that was brought up to me. The reason I brought this up was there's some racks looking at doing some safety initiatives with stair chairs and stretchers, and didn't feel that the way the local project grant was written, they would be able to do that for the agencies in their region. And so that was the other reason. So absolutely, we'll make sure we spread the wealth on that. Anybody else? Is the blood sugar just that low?
Dudley,
I just want everybody to know, because you can't see out there, but that thing says 8 minutes and 30 seconds left. We're past noon because of Eric Epley. I just want that known. If he'd have got done and out of the way, we could have started at 10:30. But
where is Eric now?
So he's at lunch, is where he is. So while all of us are in here trying to get our business done, so.
since you mentioned him, as much as I hate to bring that name up, he mentioned in the last meeting that it may well be worth our while and GTAC while to start looking a little bit at mental health issues. We know that it's a large percentage of our patient population. There are many of our frequent flyers and difficult patients to deal with. In the Satrac region, we formed a small group and looked at it about a year ago and started scratching our head. We brought together many stakeholders from hospitals, law enforcement, and we're having a hard time getting our arms around it at a regional level. It would be nice to do so at a state level as well. Perhaps at least start exchanging ideas, best practices, what you're doing as far as protocols. One of the things we saw, for example, is some of the drugs we were using in EMS just aggravated the bejeebies out of the hospitals. It really, we would dope them down, and then the hospital has to deal with that. And so it's something I think perhaps we need to start looking at this level as well now.
Okay.
I know it is a big topic on the medical director's agenda and has been for the last several meetings.
Yeah, they're dealing with it tomorrow.
If nothing else, just a report from them periodically, but I think it needs to be on our radar.
Well, I'll tweet out some data for you. It'll be #data_Brian.
Yeah.
_ Texas Rocks.
Texas Data Rocks.
Anybody else? Public comment? Yes, sir. Mr. North.
Good morning, everybody. How you doing? Sorry, I got a duck down a little bit. I think one of the things that was also brought up into the Disaster Preparedness Committee was looking at some of the opportunities afforded to EMS by the Affordable Care Act. And I know it's a big topic around the state, especially with some of our friends up in North Texas around MedStar region. And I know a lot of systems are looking at some sort of community healthcare type initiatives. There are several opportunities afforded to EMS systems through the Affordable Care Act and also with the expanding scope of EMS in our communities. I think those are some of the things that are going to need to be looked at and are going to fall underneath this committee as far as the GTAC opinions. So I'd like to see those on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Anybody else? 5 minutes left.
Could have been 8.
Could have been 8. So appreciate everybody coming out. The 1 o'clock meeting, right, Joe, was canceled, right? Yes. So there is an EMTF meeting going on in here at 1 o'clock if you want to come attend that, dealing with their directors and medical directors. So, but otherwise, the 1 o'clock was canceled. I appreciate everybody coming out. Our next meeting will be, what are we in February? So in May, here same bat time. I hope it's not same bat time, but same bat channel. So we'll try to get us off of Wednesday and back to Thursday to help everybody. So thank y'all. We are adjourned.
Don't follow.
No.